Will? Thanks for holding for us.
You are on the line with Jimmy and
Yeah, no
Austin.
problem.
Interested in this
Thanks for-
topic. Yeah.
Go ahead. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
I'm just interested in this topic. I'm interested to hear what you want to talk about.
Well, I wanted to talk about the ethics of, I guess, consuming online pornography specifically. It's not really about pornography in general because, I don't think that there's really an issue at hand just with looking at, naked people, but it's with the production of certain types of pornography. And I started thinking about this more and more with the whole Andrew Tate stuff that was in the news a couple of years ago. I don't know how close you guys followed that, but I'll just kind of cut through the stories. I think in general, it's unethical to consume a luxury product that was produced unethically. And, obviously, you wouldn't buy shoes that were produced. Actually, the guy in the previous call was talking about slave labor and stuff like that. You wouldn't want to produce something that was produced unethically. Pardon, you wouldn't want to consume something that was produced unethically.
Well, I'm going to go out on a limb and guess you're not a socialist, right?
I'm not a socialist, but I'm sympathetic to some socialist ideals.
You're talking to one. So when you say you would never consume something that was produced unethically, I'm sitting here going like, oh, you mean like everything?
Yeah.
Well, I wouldn't say I would never. That's why I said like a luxury good is something that is worse in my opinion.
You're using,
if you're surrounded.
You're using the internet and electricity right now, and American internet and electricity all has super unethical environmental sources. But this doesn't mean that things are equal. So I'm not saying, therefore, all porn is ethical. Definitely, do not mistake me for that, saying that. But I am just telling you on the pure point of like, I would never use something that was produced by slave labor. This phone call on both ends of ours probably is not completed without what you are referring to as slave labor.
I take your point.
Yeah.
I think that, for instance, you could buy, if you're buying jewelry, that's a luxury item. No one needs jewelry necessarily. But you could compare different companies and you could say to yourself, well, these jewels were grown in a lab, manufactured in Switzerland or whatever. Now, as a socialist, you would, of course, identify a lot of unethical elements to that, but it would be different than this other company, which is providing you jewelry that's made with blood diamonds, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
There are degrees,
Sure.
like you mentioned.
Right.
And I think that with pornography, one of the biggest problems...
I wouldn't buy diamonds. Diamonds are stupid. It's one of the dumbest things we spend so much money on.
I agree with you there, Jimmy.
Common rocks that we can literally synthesize.
Yeah.
Synthesize.
But anyway, sorry, keep going, Will. I want to hear your question.
Yeah. On pornography.
Yeah. Sure. Just kind of, I guess I'll cut through as much of it as I can. It comes down to consent. When you're a viewer or a consumer, you have no way to judge the consent of the actors. Anecdotally, you hear a lot of stories about the industry. A lot of the studies that take place kind of come from fairly biased or motivated organizations. It's hard to really cite that. But at its core, when you're consuming it, when you're viewing it, you can't judge the consent of the actors that are involved in porn. And while obviously some of them are going to be, willing and consenting and being compensated in as ethical a manner as possible, it's also, of course, the case that some of them aren't. But you don't have a way to know that. Like with Martha Stewart, when she was, kind of exposed with all of the unethical practices behind the production of her clothing line or whatever it was, that's something that you can verify. You can go on the ground and you can investigate the sweatshop and you can say, this sweatshop is particularly bad.
So,
and you can get that.
For the sake of brevity here, or just to kind of cue it down. So you are wanting us to omit like a company like Cheeks, which is literally like an ethical porn website. You want us to so we're not talking about that where they are all like, that's all on the very up and up. We're talking about not just like a person might regret having done porn, because regret and consent are separate categories, even though they can still be very, very sad. But we're omitting that. We're omitting independent creators on OnlyFans, right? We're omitting a person choosing to put the stuff up. And to the best of our ability, we can actually see online that they are saying that they are consenting, because otherwise, if we're going with the well, what if there's some thing here, and here? I also, if I go to McDonald's, I can't be sure there isn't a person with a gun to them. So you're saying on anything that it's like too ripe for,
Well, it doesn't even have to
no
be a person
regulation.
with a gun too. I was literally going to say the same thing, that like there are people working at fast food jobs who don't want to be there, but who
Right.
like have to be there.
Right.
There are people, I've worked plenty of jobs in my life that I would rather have been anywhere else, but
Right.
I'm forced by capitalism to be there to pay my rent.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah.
But I do want to say I find this line of questioning interesting. I live in Los Angeles, and one weird thing about living in LA is like you wind up becoming friends with a lot of porn stars. I know a lot of people who live here who are in the adult film industry, and it's something that I never had before I moved here. And now like a good amount of my friends are sex workers who work in the adult film industry. Never thought that would be part of my social circle, but they actually have a very similar job to what I do. I'm an actor and a writer in the regular film industry, I guess, the non-sex film industry. And our jobs are very similar in that there is exploitation and coercion and manipulation that exists in both of our jobs. There are people in positions of power who abuse those positions of power. So a lot of the ethical and moral hangups that people have about pornography exist, like the things that get brought up in some of these studies. And you did mention this, that a lot of these studies are obviously being done by people with a very specific bias and a very specific kind of socio-political agenda that's usually like there's a lot of times it's a religious angle of just the sort of core foundational belief that pornography and masturbation is sinful, that it's, you know, fornication outside of marriage is sinful. So there's sort of this agenda to try to paint the concept of sex work in general as inherently bad and figure out data that matches your already predetermined conclusion. And it's not that that data doesn't exist. It's not that you're not going to be able to find that data. It's just this question of like, is it more prevalent in sex work and in the adult entertainment industry than it is in any other industry? And the more that I think about this issue, the more, and with my friends that I talk to, the more I'm just kind of like, I'm not sure that it is. In fact, in many different ways, I can argue that my industry, the film industry, is sometimes worse for performers than their industry is. Like, my friends that are adult film stars seem to have a lot more autonomy over what they do at this point in their careers than I ever have. Like, they're able to kind of hand select who they perform with and which companies they like to perform with and which directors they like to work with. My friends that are women in that industry get to be producers and directors a lot more often than my friends that are women in Hollywood. And there just seems to be like I said, the abuses of power that exist with people who, we've seen like the studio system and the abuses that happen with people like Harvey Weinstein. And for years and years and years in Hollywood, there was sort of this quid pro quo system of abuse and coercion and manipulation. And I just don't, I'm not saying that you're not going to find horror stories of people who have worked in porn and walked out and said, XYZ really bad thing happened to me. I'm not saying that's not going to exist, but what I am saying is that exists in every level of entertainment, in dance and music, and it also just exists in every industry. Like, there are people who work at a fast food place who have been sexually assaulted by a manager. Like, there are people, this abuses of power, manipulation, coercion exists in literally every industry. And whenever this question comes up, I'm always curious, like, why do we zero in on sex work to have these conversations and not talk about it in a more broad way? I'm not saying that we shouldn't be having the conversation at all, because I do think that it's a worthy conversation to have. It does seem that I worry about us buying into kind of the puritanical Christian heteronormative stance on sex work. And
I think
Sure.
maybe I'm wrong, but
Sure.
I just want to jump in with a little thing, Will, because it might be faster to clarify. I assume, Will, you're not talking as much though about people like Austin's friends. I assume you're talking about more of the stories of. Okay, so I would say honestly, I think the answer is simply this. The short answer is do your best and probably avoid websites that, one, allow people under the age of 21 to post. So any of them that are like making money off the like newly legal 18 21 is probably good enough as far as like the development of your brain. A lot of people say 25 because they fundamentally don't even understand why that number is that number. 21, you have all of your adult faculties and the ability to consent. Your brain will go through a refinement period to make your brain more efficient in that remaining 4 years. There's a little bit of additional structures in like the next 2 years, but as far as everything you need, and also people are completely different. Weirdly, I think that I was I don't see a huge difference in my ability to evaluate the situation I'm in from when I was 16 years old on. That is not me advocating for anybody lowering any consent ages to 16. 18 for an age of sexual consent tends to be based on an average. There are going to be people for whom that abuses, but for the most part, on an average system, that's going to be sufficient. But for consenting to doing pornography, you should be a little bit older, mostly to cover and make that margin of people who won't have enough faculties to consent higher, or rather lower, make that margin lower. Sorry, that's getting very, very technical about the human brain. So anyone that allows creators under 21, or if you are on a website of independent creators, try to only consume creators who are at least 21, because I am aware that OnlyFans, there's some ethical issues there, because not only can you do it at 18, they it seems like trying to make it appealing for 18-year-olds to jump in right away. And that's probably going to create the biggest sort of group of people who will regret doing it later. The odds of regretting it if you do it after 21 go down a lot. So then, or how much you regret it as well. Regarding, that's the age thing. Then websites which allow unverified amateurs, I would also recommend people. So in other words, like a YouTube type of pornography site where it's like, oh yeah, there are verified people, but there's a lot of people on here that's like, who knows where this stuff comes from. You should avoid that
what
too.
I wanted to get at.
Yeah, I would avoid that too.
Really get at.
And there are more and more websites.
Issue.
I will say that I see most of my porn on Reddit. So I don't know what to, but I just don't consume it like I used to. But I believe, if I remember right, years ago, after a lot of public outcry because they were doing it wrong, that I believe like Pornhub, I think, closed up a lot of that stuff. I think they got rid of all of the unverified amateurs. They added an additional process to become a verified amateur. But when it comes to something like the Andrew Tate thing, I think it is literally like, hey man, do the best you can. But that's a situation like the guy being held at gunpoint at McDonald's. I can't know for sure there isn't something crazy happening behind those things, and those are the extenuating circumstances. So if you are putting effort into it at all, you're participating in a culture that will reduce those inequities more and more over time, and you're probably okay.
Well, the biggest issue I had, or I guess if I can kind of pull back a little bit, the types of pornography online that you're talking about as being the most problematic is the largest type of pornography that is consumed now.
Yeah.
That's the problem. Like the studio stuff, like I was kind of alluding to, that you can investigate the studios, you can figure that out. But some dude who uploads something to Pornhub or whatever, and it says, I don't know, but it's him and his wife allegedly. You don't know what's going on there. There's no way of knowing, and that's the most commonly consumed type of porn now in the United States. Anyways, I wish I had the study on hand, but that
unverified amateurs. I will tell you, if it does look like a couple, that to me, like it's a married couple or whatever, and they have a social media profile, you can go check, and all that stuff that isn't the stuff I would be quite as concerned about as I am the freshly 18, blah, blah, blah. But the absolute reality is, and it's something that kind of like disgusts me and makes me feel weird, even though I never purposefully ever did anything, but almost everybody who used pornography websites before, let's say 2015, especially things like Pornhub and the like, because of the abundance of unverified stuff, you have probably seen people who weren't legal or were hopefully you didn't click those videos, but at least in thumbnails, or who, because this was the big exposed thing that happened. I believe it was to Pornhub, but it might have been a different one, that they were like, for years the most popular videos were this one, this one, and this one, and in the case of this one, that was a 17-year-old. In the case of this one, that was a rape. Like these were like really high up on those amateur lists and stuff.
Right.
So obviously those are the types of things that you want to be more cognizant of. And again, if you'll just participate in the culture and spread the culture of trying to avoid those things, I don't know how to fix those other issues. and it's not really my wheelhouse except to give my opinion on it. Obviously, those are a thing. I'm glad we talk about that stuff more. And if you want to consume porn the most ethically, find an independent creator who's not attached to any kind of label and buy their stuff directly. But obviously, most people don't want to spend money on porn when there's such an abundant amount for free.
Let me ask you this. In the recent, over the last year, a lot of primarily Republican legislatures, Florida as well, have put down a lot of laws that kind of crack down on sites like Pornhub and stuff.
But none of that is
like
for
in
those
Florida
reasons.
now.
They're trying to stop
Correct,
the consumption of pornography
correct.
from underage people, as though underage people don't know how to use VPNs better than anybody. All they did was cause the sales of VPNs to skyrocket and me to get annoyed every time I'm on Reddit and want to open. I've got a weird label on a GIF I want to see.
Well, I was going to ask, though, do you think that that is a net benefit in
No.
order to try to keep those sites out of, the hands of people who can't show
No.
a driver's license or all that kind of stuff? You don't think so?
There's too many porn sites that are, you can literally, I'm in Texas right now. I can literally pull up porn sites that are like, we're not centered out of America. Fuck you. We don't care. What? Oh, is Texas going to tell our Swedish company to do shit? Like, they can't do fucking shit. And then again, you're talking about young people. I think about the lengths I went to consume. I didn't have access really to online porn, maybe every now and then when I was a kid. The amount of the lengths I went to consume some sort of sexual material, we're talking like hiding magazines in the woods and shit. You think kids aren't going to figure out how to use a VPN when like back in the day we were creating stashes in the woods? Bro, it's not going to work.
Yeah, I think that this attempt to try to
love, right?
This attempt to try to protect kids from stuff that could be damaging or psychologically or harmful to them it's just something that they've been trying to do my entire life, and I've never seen an attempt be successful. And I also think that what winds up happening weirdly, and again, because I don't want to minimize some of the stuff that we're talking about here, that there is, that if you go searching for evidence of bad stuff out there in the world of adult entertainment, you're going to find evidence of people who have been hurt, and you're going to find evidence of it. But so I'm not trying to minimize it, but I do think that what happens anytime that we lean into this attempt to how do we protect kids from this stuff, we wind up opening up this whole other can of worms where you create this culture, this like repressive, sex negative culture of like fear and shame around sex that leads to more sexual violence. I think that a lot of sexual violence is born out of regressive and repressive concepts around sex. So I was raised in a state that was very all about, like abstinence and trying to preach just staying away from it. Don't look at that stuff. Don't masturbate. Don't have sex. Don't do anything like that. And what it creates is really unhealthy psychological attachments to stuff like porn and stuff like it creates higher levels of sexual violence, and and so I think that, I don't know, it's like I don't really, it is a complex situation because I don't really know what the solution is. I've had people in my family ask me for their kids. They go, what am I supposed to do with my kids and the internet? And I'm like, I genuinely don't know. I'm so glad I don't have kids because I don't know the answer to that question. I don't know how. Hard. Like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to say. Like, your kids are better at the internet than you are. And I don't know how you're supposed to outmaneuver them and protect them from what's out there. I think we're just going to have to almost accept that we're in a new paradigm where kids are being exposed to different kinds of things at earlier ages. But also it's like, I don't know, like I think about kids programming and the stuff that kids watch on YouTube and like how different it is from the programming that I grew up on. I grew up on network programming that had like writers' rooms and people who were actually trying to create thoughtful, interesting content and interesting TV shows. And now I watch what kids are watching on YouTube, and it's like parents who are just exploiting their child and putting them in front of the camera and doing this like mindless drivel. And I'm like, I think that this is just as bad for kids as anything else on the internet. It's just sort of like mind melting soup, idiocracy garbage. So I don't know.
When I was in high school, every kid in my school knew how to bypass the school's firewall to see homestarrunner.com. They'll figure out how to get to porn. Do you know what the Opera browser is, by the way? Have you ever heard of Opera for a browser?
No.
Oh, it's like one of the most popular, like the ones that aren't the big ones, like Edge or anyway. Opera now literally has a built-in VPN and for free. So it's kind of like these laws are meaningless because what is the average age that a kid knows how to install an app on an iPad? 7? Certainly years before they but want to access porn. So just back to the original question. I think it's a net nothing. It's just an annoyance for adults.
Yeah, all it winds up doing, I feel like when we try to figure out how to put the toothpaste back in the tube of what the kids are seeing online, is it just, I think, adds to the culture of, oh no, sex. Oh no, sex is bad. Oh no, oh no, no, no. And maybe the answer is that we just need to just be more realistic about the fact that like kids are human beings who have their own experience with sexuality at early ages. I know I did. And I'm not, it sounds so weird to say that as an adult because it feels like the carte blanche position you're supposed to have as an adult is like, kids aren't sexual beings.
Right.
And I don't think of kids sexually because that's not, I'm not, like that's
despite the mustache, I know for a fact he only likes adults.
But I know that when I was a kid, I was just on my friend who's an adult performer, and she has this podcast called First Thirst. And the question of the podcast is, what was your first like sexual awakening? And my answer on the show is like, I was a horny little kid. As early as from kindergarten, I was thinking about like kissing people, and like I'd watch people kiss in movies and be like, I want to do that. And so I think that like denying the fact that children are having their own experience with the way that their body comes hardwired has weird psychological effects, because as soon as you're aware of that and you communicate that to an adult and they tell you, don't do that, don't talk about that, that's bad. And then you have to grow up your whole life going like, okay, so this is something I have to hide. This is something I have to like pretend like is not part of me because the adults in my life are telling me I'm bad because of it. And then it's not until you're an adult that you kind of go, why did all the adults make me feel bad about that if everyone's doing it? And it's this weird like thing that we have that you get older and you're like, so we were all doing that? And the adults were telling us that I was bad for doing it. Yeah. And I don't know. I don't know that we fix. I know that we're trying to protect people from experiencing violence and that violence is real. But I also think that we create this psychological problem around the concept of human sexuality at such a young age when we're so hyper fixated on like, how do we prevent the kids from becoming sexualized psychologically too early? And it's just like, I don't know that you can. I think that human beings just sort of get horny at young ages too.
Dude, wait, so my friend Jesse in chat just wrote, I was obsessed from seeing boobs from like 10 years old. Okay, I bet you it was earlier than that, Jesse, but I understand the obsession there. I was thinking about what you're saying. I have this canon event in my head where I can remember being in a kitchen in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and realizing, not like having the experience I would have now by that excitement, but realizing as a kid, I was like, oh, I don't remember. I wouldn't have known the word cleavage at that point, but I was like, if I look at cleavage, I get a boner. Like I remember being like so young, realizing that cleavage gives me a boner. We're talking super young.
I was on this podcast, I was talking about how weird, like the people that I was attracted to, I was like really into Bridget Wilson from from Billy Madison, like Veronica Vaughn, and she's in Mortal Kombat. She plays Sonya. And it's like, that was like a 30-year-old woman that me at like 8 was like, I want her. And it's like, what is that? What am I doing at that age being attracted to a woman named Bridget? And I, like
12-year-old me thought I had a shot with Beyonce.
And I,
yeah, go ahead, Will. Last time.
Yeah. Sorry, Will.
No, that's okay. I feel like it's kind of a different category, but I was going to ask a question that might kind of.
Yeah, we just got to go quick because I'm realizing how late it is. So go ahead.
Yep. Do you feel that do you feel that it's a violation of a person to have deepfake porn or AI porn created of them?
I'm actually, okay. I'm opposed to non-pornographic AI represent. I think that you should, even Donald Trump, and I laugh at the ones we're making. But there was a kind of like our last guy, Tom, tried to be like, oh, Nancy Pelosi. He was like, yeah, there was a person who's a really dumb but atheist conservative YouTuber who tried to like call me or see if I was consistent on his unethical use of AI to represent people from this channel. God, he's so shallow minded. Anyway, sorry. He's just crazy. And he was like,
Well,
so
I
even
don't
if
know
it's
about any of
Donald
that.
Trump, and I was like, yes, I think that ultimately your image and voice, you should have autonomy over the extension of those things. So something that's like very clearly like drawn art or cartoon art, fine. But things that are put out there as such an accurate representation that you'll actually fuck with people's memories. Like if you are doing like wouldn't it be funny if we heard what it was like for Donald Trump to say such and such, and it's in such an accurate way that even if you are declaring like I made this with AI, that you can fuck with a person's memory and be like, I feel like I'm remembering a time Donald Trump said, put your cum in my tum tum. Put that cum in my tum tum. My imitation is not so isn't accurate enough. Yeah, it's now that's a
no, it's in my it's in my memory now.
Yeah. I do think that you should have autonomy over your image and your with parody being allowed, but clear.
That's what
obvious.
that's what this
Now,
that's
do you think
partially.
that kind of illustrates? Sorry,
Oh, I was just saying that's
I was gonna
partially
say,
what
do you
the
think
Screen
that kind of
Actors Guild was.
illustrates?
Go ahead, Will.
I'm sorry, there's a little bit of a delay on my end. No, I was just going to say, do you think that that kind of points to the notion that there might be sort of a different category, when we're talking about name, image, and likeness, pornographic representations of stuff, where a person is in some, you talk about consent and you talk about regret being very different things, which of course, I totally agree. But in the same sense that you can sell, in the moment, you can make the decision to sell your image and then you can regret having done it. Do you think that there's something that's being kind of pointed to where in the future, after you've come to regret having sold the image, other people are then able to consume that as a product in a way that might affect you? Or do you think that does not affect you?
Yeah. Porn robots. There's going to be like porn AI is, as much as we're thinking of all the other AIs, porn AI is going to be what the biggest thing is out of it. Cause that's what every industry, not every, but so many industries, it's like, oh, the internet, it's great for all these things, but the internet is mostly porn. So it's, there's going to be lots of stuff like that.
And again, that's what I was saying in my initial response is like when we hyperfixate on the implications in the sex work industry, I don't know why we're hyperfixating because this exact problem is going to exist in so many different ways in so many different industries. And it is a problem across the board. And what I was saying is this is partially what the Screen Actors Guild was striking about is we're like, hey, our industry's over if they just start making AI movies and they start taking actors' faces and likenesses and making AI renderings of them that sound like them and writing AI scripts based on the works of human writers. Like we're cooked, and we can still say, well, there's going to be ethical people who won't want that. But we also know that we live in an idiocracy full of people who like increasingly dumber and dumber things. So there is going to be a market for that. And I just don't know. I don't know how to stem the tide of it, but I also don't know why. Yeah, and I don't know why we should focus so heavily on just sex work because this is it seems like a little bit of a puritanical thing because I'm like, you're not wrong. This problem's going to exist, but it's going to exist across the board, and it's going to be an ethical problem across the board that's going to harm people in lots of different ways in lots of different industries.
Arguably, AI porn will attack non-porn stars much more. I mean, don't get me wrong, porn stars may lose jobs to it, but like think about a lot of us think of it in such local things, but think about it as a foreign weapon. If you wanted to like really fuck up somebody, if you could mass distribute porn that people cannot tell the difference, cannot be sure that it isn't real of anybody, and obviously it's going to be more women than men, but you can change the opinions, you can fuck with people. Like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez already has deepfakes like distributed of her, but they're getting more and more and more accurate. And so will they try to use that to be like, yo, are you really going to vote for a woman that you saw this video of this thing happening to her? It's going to be used as a foreign tool, a foreign weapon as well. And so even if we said as Americans, we're not going to do this to each other, retaliatory economic a weapon from any assholes who have access to massive AI. Obviously, we're going to be thinking about what China would be making and distributing here. That kind of stuff's going to suck too. Not just amongst porn, but in general, AI fake stuff. The future's bleak, just for the record. If anybody thinks like I don't know. People, do you come to this channel to hear me give you hope? Because no, it's all, we may have already lost. We're going to lose. Oh, yeah. I think we lost.
I was just watching a Hank Green video about how even real things look fake now. And at the end of the video, he was just kind of like, his conclusion is he was like, I have no idea how we're going to be able to tell what's real in 5 years. I don't know.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, like there was this bit, it was like that test rocket that they did like a 3D drone footage of it as it came down and it crashed. It was trying to land. And when it dropped about maybe 200 feet from the Earth's surface and landed and blew up. And everyone on the video was like, oh, this is obviously AI. This is fake. But it was real. It was a real video. And he was just kind of like, yeah, I get it. Like the video does look weirdly fake. And now it's there's this line between, and it's only going to get worse and worse and worse. And it really is like you said, it's bleak to look into the future and go, how are we going to tell what anything is if the internet is like at least half fake AI videos that look real, at least half,
and the stuff is going to get funded on the back of things that we think we want, because it's already happening. Instagram filters are the basis for a lot of the like just modifying faces and stuff. That's the stuff, the foundation that's going to be, because think about like, if I still looked the way I looked a year ago, having now lost somewhere in the vicinity of closing in on 90 pounds now, I would be tempted by something that makes me look exactly like this, and it'd be like, oh man, for $2, I can just look like this instead of looking like something this would have eaten, my old self would have eaten. Like that's the difference. And so that's the appeal. They're going to appeal to our vanity for things. And a lot of this stuff will be financed. Their development will be financed by our own vanity and the things that we want. And then it's going to be flipped and weaponized. In some cases. In other cases, it's going to be governments being like, well, won't it be so useful if when the Canadian election comes up, we can have a robocall going out that sounds like Carney is calling all the Canadian citizens to tell them, hey, we've actually moved the election, so show up on this day instead of that day. And people don't know the difference. And it even looks like it's coming from the right place. Like that kind of stuff will just be developed by other nations because it's powerful. And by the way, already happens. There was literally Joe Biden robocalls like that going out in the 2020 election.
Yeah, we're in for a fun ride.
Hey, if you liked that clip, you'd love the whole thing. Hit like, subscribe, leave a comment, patreon.com/calltheline. That one sucked. Use it.